like to introduce Nitin to speak to us. I'm looking forward to hearing him speak. I've read a lot of what Nitin's had written on LinkedIn, and I'm looking forward now to hearing him speak. He's going to speak to us about the X factor in UX. He says building features is easy, testing those features are easy too, but finding the right features for the right people and testing it by understanding their needs is challenging. So I look forward to hearing Nitin speak, and hand over to Nitin now.
Thanks, Mike. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Let me share my screen first. Yeah. Thanks for the wonderful introduction, Mike.
Thank you.
You actually covered what I kept in the first slide. Okay, is my screen visible now? Perfect. All right. So it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for the BCS team, especially Nicola and Mike, for having me here. And I'm super excited to meet you all, virtually at least. So before we jump into the presentation, I just wanted to start with a quick reminder, right? So what does UX mean? So UX is actually a bridge between frustration and pleasure. And while we're building a product, actually we are trying to make a feeling to our users, right? So how a user should have a connection or have a feeling when they interact with our product or features which we develop. And that is where Mike actually said, like, one of my elevator pitch for this presentation was building features is easy. Testing those can be easy too, but building the right features for the right people in the way they're supposed to use it is actually tricky. So to build and scale products that users crave, it is important to understand how might you bring the X factor in the decisions you make while you deliver a seamless user experience. So we're going to be discussing around these 4 factors actually. So what a user thinks when they interact with a product, how a user feels when they interact with a particular feature, and what they say and does with a specific feature which we develop. My name is Nitin. I'm the founder of Synapse QA community space for testers and working as a head of QA for Logify. I was born and raised in India, where I started my career in testing. As someone who loves the testing craft, I'm fortunate enough to lead a team that is really passionate about bringing quality into what they deliver, and also building a unique community space for the testers to make them believe in themselves. So without further ado, let's get started. So this is a common question we all have in mind when it comes to UX, UI, or usability, right? Are all the same? So UI is basically what we see, and user experience is how we feel when we are interacting with something. And usability is basically how easily we can interact with a component or a feature. So it's not the same. It overlaps each other, but when we say, are these the same? It is not the same. So they have a thin layer that separates each separately. And I want to share a personal story, which actually given me a worse experience on user experience, right? So I was recently trying to book a flight to travel to Paris. So one of the website was offering me cheap tickets. So it was cheap. So then I decided, okay, I should go with that website. So it took me like 20 minutes to complete the entire booking flow, and thanks to the slowness of the application. And when I completed, actually what happened was I proceeded with the payment. There was a confirmation page, and I clicked on the button where it proceeded with the payment, right? So when the payment actually proceeded, it keep on loading for a longer time. And I was expecting a next page. Being a tester, I want to see a confirmation page, but the next page never loaded. And that let several questions have popped up in my mind. Did my payment went through? Did I get charged twice or multiple times because I was clicking to see what happens next? And nothing happened. And what happened was my phone was not with me. It was on the other side. Apparently, I got an email saying that my reservation was confirmed. But since the phone was not with me, I didn't know what happened. So I tried to reach out to the support. What they told me was they were expecting a connection, like a handshake from the payment provider. So it was delayed, but your booking went through. So for me, the screen was still loading while I was having the conversation with the support. So being a user, I would say it was a really bad experience. It was not pleasant at all. And the support was saying like, we already sent out an email. So the functionality was working perfectly fine. The booking worked. I got a confirmation ticket, but I never saw the next screen, right? So it was something like, it is not technical. So when it comes to a general flow, the flow actually worked. But for an user, an end user who doesn't understand anything technical, it doesn't give a pleasant experience. So if I will ever go back to the website again, I might think twice. So 84% of users actually abandon the application for a bad user experience, and only 16% sticks. So that's only a quite low number who sticks if we are giving a bad user experience to the end user. And why user experience become afterthought when we are building something, right? So there is always two things that comes when we talk about user experience. Should we need to optimize now, or we can optimize it later? So we have to find a balance between what we have to optimize now in terms of bringing better user experience, or we usually lack understanding of when exactly we need to optimize. So when you are having a product definition done, it is better to consider user experience in place, and then you think or analyze the situation when exactly for this specific project we have to consider user experience aspect, right? Say if we are building a feature that requires an autocomplete for address, we could think of, okay, should we have it now, whether the autocomplete works in the initial stage itself, or we just provide an option to automatically fill based on the GPS location. So you could either do an autocomplete which populates from the user's previous inputs, or we could actually enable a usage of GPS location that fetches based on their current location, right? So we have to find a balance between whether we have to optimize now or we have to optimize it later. And what happens in reality is basically users only need essential features that gives a better user experience. And when we build something, actually we consider essential and non-essential features that goes along certain other dimensions. And what happens in the end is basically we build more what is non-essential and we give it to our users. And that leads to confusion around users, and they don't know whether they are getting what they exactly wanted from a product, right? So this image actually, I found it from LinkedIn, basically. So user experience really matters. And that is why companies such as Apple and Google has trillions of revenue, and people love to use their products, right? So when we build something, our form will be terribly looking like this. We have tons of input fields and we need to have like everything filled, but we could find a better way to optimize that in terms of better user experience, like similar to what Apple and Google does, right? So it's only one field, or either you do it with a touch action. So you don't need to have like a lot of iterations going through or a lot of input validations going through. You could just do it in a one click. So what I could personally recommend is don't just test, think like a user, always have that user point of view in our mind. Start to observe and question, right? So why I said observe is we should always think from it. When we think from a user point of view, you should always be open to look around what happens around us, right? So we should be checking how our friends use a specific application and what they expect when they are using an application. Say, for example, Uber, right? We want to book a cab using Uber. And when someone is booking an Uber, you just observe how they perform a booking transaction in Uber. So you understand what they expect from an e-hailing service, and you start to question around. If you are ever encountering a similar situation, you start to question, okay, so my user might think from differently from this point of view. So how we are tackling that situation, right? And when it comes to usability, actually it is the extent to which a product can be used with effectiveness, efficiency, satisfaction for a specific context of use. Going back to the Uber experience, so say our context of use is actually to get a cab. and how effectively a user can book the cab, how much efficient they are in performing a booking operation, and how satisfied are they with the service Uber provides. And that is what usability means for Uber. So did they just get it easily, or does the application feels much more faster when they are trying to book a cab when they are in a rush to reach somewhere, right? So that is why usability is more important, and it covers around these three dimensions: effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. So what makes us a superhero is basically to be flexible and be agile. So we should always think like a user and prioritize how they feel and what they might do with our application, and discover the significance of verification and validation, prioritizing user experience, not only functionality validation. So we need to ensure that our user experience is on a higher level, and we are ensuring that, and leverage automation and strategic testing for exceptional user experience. So when we are thinking about automation, mostly we validate functional flows. So we should actually consider how user experience can be considered in terms of bringing automation and strategic initiatives for QA, and always embrace a tester's mindset. And like a most important thing is to ask more questions. So if we are not asking more questions, we fall into the trap of assumptions and we cannot uncover what we exactly need to do. And the next point was like to become a superhero, actually we want to be customer advocates. So we could actually use a set of user personas based on the data we have for the application, and we could do user profiling, how our user could use our application, and which all are the main use cases or which all are the main functionalities they use. So we could identify the critical flows, and we should actually have a competitor analysis. We could do some industry analysis, and we could check out the reviews of the application, right? Because when we are reading the reviews of specific application, we know how our end user feels while they are using our product. And for me, it actually helped me to understand what all are their pain point. And I usually do like pairing with our customer support agents to understand how our user face some issues and what they expect the product, how they imagine a specific feature to be performing. So those kind of the insight I gather from them, and I consider during the call like QA strategy definitions, and make use of analytics, right? So have analytics in place, help data to drive your decisions, and always think of harnessing the crowd. So you can actually have a smaller iteration of a feature to understand how user perceives it, and to have like a beta testing before you roll it out the complete crowd. And then this is actually one of the important factor which we need to consider when we talk about user experience. So we need to have like personas, right? So a tech savvy person, so going back to the booking use case, which I personally experienced. So me being knowing at least a bit of technical, my expectations and my understanding will be a bit different from what my dad will do, right? So if my dad is doing the same action, having a technical explanation won't be sufficient or enough for him. So he will be expecting something on the layman's term, and I might be expecting something on a more technical understanding. So why the system was failing that way, right? So having different personas will help us to understand what exactly, like we could have like different classes of users, and we could understand or derive our strategies based on these personas. That will give us a better understanding on how we could have a better user experience testing strategy, and consider this in the early stages of the life cycle as well. So what I tried in the past was to have an experience strategy focusing on customers' perspective. So I collaborated with our customer support agents. We went through the reviews we have, we went through the customer calls, and we did some user interviews, gathering inputs from our real users. And actually, we kept it as a touchstone for us to influence all the decisions around the technology features and interfaces we built. And it was really helpful. So when we passed it over to our product team, it was really helpful for them to define products in a way that user experience sits on top always. And we could always have this customer perspective throughout the development lifecycle. And then there is something called user testing in the field of designing. So what I coined was something like user-centered testing. So it's not an end user point of testing. You are leveraging your crowd to test out something. It is actually before that, when we are having a pre-production stage, actually what we need to do is we need to identify our end users, and we need to ensure that the goals and needs of what we are building is meeting what our end users expect from us. So when we come up with a product, or when we come up with a product idea, what we need to think is have a strategical thought. Why do people want to use this in the first place? And then think something tactical. How well are the people able to use it? So in order to have that, we should have a holistic approach, not only focusing on a specific feature or a product. We should understand the bigger picture. So what are we trying to build from a company's or business point of view? What is our product strategy, and what exactly our users need? And we should have a long-term vision that where or which direction we are headed to in multiple years time, where we as a product will fit into the market, right? And then we should consider our user will be expecting this feature to be built in this way, so that it covers our long-term vision. And then have a business alignment. Being QAs, we only cannot do much of changes, so we have to constantly collaborate with our business stakeholders. So ensure that UX goals are met and it is part of the business objectives, so that we could have it in the earlier stages of development. And make use of researchers, right? So we should always have an eye on data, and we should always understand how our user interacts with the application, so we could get a heat map of the functionalities which are mostly used by our users by talking to our data team. So we have to be like constantly discussing with multiple departments, gathering insights, and all this strategy, the user-centric strategy, has to be research-driven all the time. So it has to be complemented by research, and then you build a foolproof strategy out of it that supports your design, development, and testing. So stakeholder collaboration is key while having an ability to see the bigger picture. So going back to what Mark Twain said, right? So supposing is good, but finding out is better. But how we find out things and how we understand what has to be done from a QA point of view when it comes to user experience, right? So first thing first, have a childlike state of mind. So a state where wonder was the baseline. So everything wonders us every point of time, because we are trying out something new. So remember, there is always more than one right answer. Forget all your assumption. You don't need to have like anything in your mind. So if you are seeing something, or if you are trying out something, or if you are testing a product or feature for the first time, remove all your assumptions. Go beyond the static, like traditional flows. You try out something different and think from a user point of view that, like, okay, is it how it's supposed to be working, right? Is it what my user will do? Is it something user expects at the end? So always have a beginner's mindset. Ask all the questions, because kids always ask questions, right? So they will constantly ask why it's supposed to be like that. So you should always ask the same question to the development teams, product, and the other business stakeholders to understand better, like in terms of users. And always have in mind that when you are testing something, simplicity is the key. So you have to keep an eye on how the designs are built, whether the interface is clear, clutter-free, and it guides the user in a way that it is easier to navigate through screens. And ensure all our users, regardless of their abilities, they can access specific features which we build, and continuously refine the strategy. So if you are defining a strategy at the earlier stage of a project, constantly iterate it. So you don't need to fix it like, okay, this is my strategy, I'm going to stick to it all the time. So constantly I have an iteration, have a review, after having discussions or your research, right? So you have your research backed up with you, and then you try to iterate based on your research insights, so that throughout the entire development, you have something constantly rolling, and you actually ship the quality right into the, you actually bake the quality right into the product which you are building, considering the user point of view. And when you are doing these all researches, always have in mind that the perceived behavior is not actually equal to the actual behavior. So like I said, ordering a cab from Uber, it actually the simple flow, right? So in the end, if you are thinking about the functionality, and user opens the app, gives the destination, and they order a cab, so they get it. So that's the normal traditional flow. But the users will always use things in a way we don't expect, and that is what makes us human, I would say. So if I am booking a cab, I might consider several alternatives, right? So I will check whether there is a bus or subway which could take me easy, because Uber is always expensive most of the time. And I will also check if there is another competitors that gives me a better pricing, right? So if I'm having an Uber for 10 euros, I will see whether I could get it for 8 euros in other competitors. So while checking Uber for having a ride, I will go with several other flows, interacting with multiple other components, or having a different interpretation at all. So when we consider this, the ordering and Uber flow, actually we could derive all these behavioral changes, which could be possibly done by an user. And that expectation of having like understanding an actual behavior gives us more opportunities to derive a better strategy that has user experience on top. And you have to get rid of the perfectionist mindset when it comes to user experience. Always keep in mind that we have to embrace imperfection, because users won't go in the perfect path which we define them to go. They do mistakes, and they will try to recover from that mistakes, right? So what we also need to do is, we don't need to go to the perfect path all the time. We should embrace imperfection. We should try what is imperfect, and we should go with those flows and see how our app behaves, and what all are the feedback which we give back to our users. And then empathy is your ultimate weapon. So it's not just you who want to fulfill the goal of having user experience. You will be having constant collaboration with the PM, or you will be having a constant collaboration with your developer. So when you talk to them, talk with the language which they understand, and in short, pay attention to the users, work with the programmers and PMs to have like a better alignment. And when you're talking to PMs, talk in the language of PM, which they understand. So they want metrics, they want retention. So those kind of concept you could get it from the research you have done. And when you talk to developers, you talk in a way that they understand. So this API call fails, this webhook is not working, or this functionality is not performing in the way, like the performance is just crap, right? So those kind of things. So they understand how the system and the interactions are happening, and what you are trying to put in table as a user advocate or a customer advocate. So it gives a better strength in terms of having like empathy as our ultimate weapon. And what I try personally is to have these two frameworks to help me define scenarios that gives me like a better user engagement. So always when it comes to testing, or when you define a test strategy or test scenario, have these mnemonics with you, right? So pass and AIDA. So pass is something like you have to think of the problem which you are trying to do, which you are trying to solve. And is there a nervous situation? Is there something that could make the user nervous while they are performing the functionality, why they are using the functionality? And is there a solution for that? So having these three aspects or dimensions will give a better understanding to talk to the product owners, to ask more questions around these three. And when you are getting these answers, have this other mnemonic in handy with you to think about like how much attention having this feature, how much attention my user will have in the application, how much interested this feature is to them, how much desire, like will they come back for this specific feature, and are they expecting something more, right? And how the actions of a user can be defined. Say, for example, I recently moved to Spain, so I had to learn Spanish language, and I was using Duolingo, right? So I daily have I spend like 10 minutes, 15 minutes time in Duolingo. And recently I couldn't open the app at all, but they actually prompt me to have some interest. Okay, Nitin, you have your daily sessions. So they send out reminders, app notifications, and they send out even emails, which makes me go back to Duolingo, open it at least one time a day, and practice my Spanish, right? So I have a problem that I need to learn Spanish, but sometimes I tend to ignore it. Having an interest, having interest triggered in the users actually help them to bring back to the application, like what Duolingo does. And quality isn't just about the number of bugs which we define or report. It is always about user impact. So what impact we make in our users and how they feel connected to the application. So when you talk about quality, it is basically about user impact rather than the number of bugs which we define. And we talked a lot about user experience, and we have to keep in mind that we alone as QAs doesn't own user experience. So all the disciplines we cross collaborate should support, should empower, and also prioritize the user experience of the product collaboratively together. So that is why we need empathy as our ultimate weapon. And finally, what matters is, are we building the right things? Is it easy to use? And do our users want to use it? So these are some references we could have for further reads. And with that said, thank you so much for listening to me. And I hope that after this, you will have the human perspective considering the users of our software. And because most of the time we don't spend like much time considering our users, right? And that is what we need. So it's been a pleasure, and I am here to answer if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Hi, Nitin, it's Paul. I've got a question.
Hi,
Thank
Paul.
you for that talk, very informative.
Thank you.
For me, it's how do you get hold of the customer data in terms of, you know, your metrics, because that's where the gold is, because otherwise you start developing loads of features, and as you say, you overdevelop.
Yep.
And the business says, well, actually, we want you as the IT team or the team to develop. And how do you get around that? How do you get that real value add pieces of information that actually, if the customer goes on this journey, they're going to go on this journey. We don't want you to add it features because we don't need to go gold plate it.
Got it. Thanks for that question, Paul. So what I did in the past, right? So our company was having certain user-specific metrics in place. So we have like a heat map based on the user functionalities, right? So if we are building a product or a feature which we roll out, we actually monitor in terms of like heat maps. So we know what all are the critical path that user might interact when they have a certain functionality delivered in production. And then we have like our data team has a really good business analytic platform built. So we know what exactly is breaking, what exactly is working well in production, and how our users behave, right? So what all are the platforms which they use while they interact with our application, what's basically their OS and their geographical locations, and all those sort of information is already there. So when we define the strategies, we back our research with those data, so with those metrics. And we do have like tools like Datadog in place. We do use Sentry, and we do have Firebase Insights that actually powers all these metrics. So, but eventually all these products are integrated, but we feed data from them, and our data team did a business or business intelligence platform, to be frank. So they actually collect data from different products, they aggregate it and build an in-house tool that gives us business insight from a user point of view. And that is the point which we leverage when we have a strategy built around user experience.
Thank you, Nitin, very useful.
Thank you. Andy, yes, would you be interested? Actually, yes. While I was preparing the slides, I actually thought about writing something for the future testers around user experience.
Awesome. Thank you very much. What was I going to say? I can pass my contact details to Nicola to pass, or Mike, or pass them on and get them to pass them on to yourself if you like.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely, would love that. Just let me know.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
I've a quick question, Nitin. Really interested in your talk. Thank you very much. You spoke on one slide about customers' needs and goals. And I was thinking, how do you define those, identify those?
Okay, so how we does that is basically we run certain like user interviews, basically with all our like we segment our users in certain categories, right? So we have personas, and we have like one person at least representing one of the persona which we define, and we try to have an interview with them, and we go through the functionality flows along with them. And or maybe we ask them to interact with the wireframe which we develop and give their suggestions. So based on that user testing phase, we get certain insight from them how they want the product or functionality to be performing, and also how they expect the entire flow should look like, right? It might not be completely what we want to build, but we at least get some insight, and we try to optimize in a way that that user end up going complaining that their opinion was not heard, right? So at least we consider a certain part of it. So user testing phase or user interviews really helps to get the customer point of view.
Thank you. So,
yes. Anyone else?
Looks like that's it. If anyone does have any questions, I would actually say that we could submit them to Nitin later. So if you want to email us at BCS SIGisT, then we could pass them on for you.
Perfect. Thanks,
okay.
Nicola.
Okay, so that's the end of our AGM and talk. Thank you to everybody who attended today. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to try and answer those for you. If you want to get involved at a later date, please obviously get in touch with us and let us know, and we can talk to you about any of that and any roles that we currently have available. Thank you to committee for joining today, and to Nitin for giving your lovely talk. Yeah, that's it from me. Does anyone else from committee want to add anything else before we close out?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.